Good afternoon and welcome to the Pensacola Historical Society show, brought to us by the fine folks at WWF Television. We are all Ivan survivors now. I think we can safely say that. We're sorry that we couldn't bring you last month's show, but the advent of Ivan changed everybody's plans. Today, I think we'll make it up, because I think we have a very good show, a very informative and entertaining show today. First, I'd like to speak a little bit about some of the Historical Society news. With the hurricane, we did suffer quite a bit of damage to both the museum and the resource center, mainly water damage, roof damage. We didn't put a blue roof on, but we did do some work, and so we have a temporary roof. It does still leak when it rains. One of the things we're asking members and interested people in Pensacola that are interested in Pensacola's history, we've got about a $30,000 deductible on our insurance policy. So we're asking as many people as possible to donate $50 or more if you're inclined to help defray the costs of our deductibles. As you know, Pensacola is a very rich historical city, and the history is one of the things that brings tourism and people to retire alike. You can only lay at the beach so long before you're a lobster, but Pensacola's history, you can involve yourself for many years in that, and it's interesting history too. Most of you probably know that our executive director, Sandra Johnson, is retiring. In fact, she got married last Saturday. And is on her honeymoon now. She'll be back when you see the show. So we're in the process of selecting a new executive director. So we have all kind of things going on with the society now, some good, some bad, and some in transition. We would appreciate those of you that are watching that aren't members to consider joining the society. The society does a lot of good in keeping Pensacola's history alive, in protecting it. Fortunately, the Resource Center, which a lot of people come and do genealogy. They come get old copies of photos. We have hundreds of thousands of photos dating back, to the beginning of the camera, I suppose. We had an excellent meeting, general meeting, last night, which was Monday the 18th. And the subject was Flying Machines over Pensacola. It's a book that's just been written, and we have copies of it in the gift shop of the museum. And it's amazing the rich. Everybody knows we have a rich aviation history, but when you actually learn some of the facts about it and the excitement over the early flying machines, it really adds a whole new look and new feeling about aviation and about the part that Pensacola played in it. We almost had the Wright brothers, but I guess you'll have to read the book to find out all about that. The next meeting, this last meeting and the next meeting were held at, and are going to be held at Rosie O'Grady's in Seville Quarter. It's our temporary meeting area while the Resource Center and the Beacon are being repaired because of the water damage. The website, which WWF is nice enough to flash up from time to time on the camera, www.pensacolahistory.org, will have information concerning the upcoming meetings, location, and any interesting news that people need to know about. Another thing that's important to us and to preserving Pensacola's history is those of you that have artifacts, photos, memorabilia, trophies, most anything that is part of Pensacola's history or Northwest Florida's history can be donated to the Historical Society and be put in storage, protected, safeguarded, and then preserved for future generations to learn about things. One of the photos that's in the book, Flying Machines over Pensacola, shows an airplane that, if it had got off the ground, would have been the first Army, or would have shown or proved the Army flew first before the Navy here in Pensacola. The News Journal had a photo in their archives which was very in bad condition and really couldn't be seen very well. And the author the book went to the Historical Society, went through hundreds or thousands of pictures, and found a really good condition picture of this particular flying machine, which was going to be flown at Fort Barrancas. Unfortunately, they hit a tree on the way down and never came back up again. So they were not successful, and so they were not the first military to fly in Pensacola, or the first of anybody to fly in Pensacola. The next item of business we want to talk about is the Ghost Walk. Since this show is airing on the 30th, that's the last night of the Historical Society's Ghost Walk, conducted from the museum downtown. We had 2 weekends this year. They tell me that reservations are coming in strong, and it's going to really be a good ghost walk. They're incorporating a carriage ride with the Ghost Walk, in addition to the Ghost Walk this year. So if you haven't bought tickets, got your reservations yet, it's probably too late. It's probably booked up, but you can still try to call the museum at 433-1559 and check. But if not, then we do it every year. It's one of the annual fundraisers, and we'd be happy to have you next year to hear some of the really great Pensacola ghost stories. And whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's a lot of people that do, and there's a lot of people that have open minds about some of the mysterious goings and comings that have happened in Pensacola, particularly in the historical district. I've heard a few of them, and some of them really do give you pause. There's some very credible people that have seen things that seem to defy explanation. And one of those people that seem to defy, one of the people that tells some of these stories is with us today. And for those that don't recognize him with his Halloween mask on, I thought I was looking in the mirror.
I'm doing my Ted Brown imitation.
Yeah, well, except I still have a little more. Now, my father, he has less, but Don Parker, who is well known in our community for many activities.
Indeed.
So Don also tells ghost stories. He is part of the Ghost Walk and puts on, I think a pretty ghoulish costume. I don't know if he wears fangs or not. I don't know if he needs to wear fangs, but he does a great job, along with a lot of other volunteers that learn their parts, learn the stories, and then take their little flashlights and groups out, and they go, and most of them come back. I think maybe the ghosts have
very
got a few
high percentage.
high percentage.
Yeah.
We haven't lost many.
So 80, 90% make it back.
So Don's going to tell us some Pensacola ghost stories because it is the Halloween season, and we like our ghost stories in Pensacola. So Don, how about entertaining us for a few minutes?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the procedure itself. We're talking about walking tours in the downtown Pensacola area. And we've developed, I say we, I'm sort of ingratiating myself into the we part here. Actually, the historical folks have put together, they've done all the real work. All we have to do is memorize, or at least familiarize ourselves with the script, and then go out there and walk around and tell people what to do. When I got involved with them 4 or 5 years ago, they said, you have your choice of tours. Which ones do you want? And I looked over the information that they had and was immediately and instantly attracted to the bar and brothel tour. So I said, I will take that one. Having spent 18 years as a law enforcement officer, I knew something about being in bars. Didn't have much experience with brothels, but I figured, what the heck? I can learn. So I got involved in that particular tour, and that's been a lot of fun. That starts at the Historical Museum and goes basically out to Palafox Street, north to Romana, then back down south all the way to Main Street, and then back up to the Historical Museum. So we walk about a mile or so, and it takes about an hour, depending on how fast the group moves. And it's fun to do. I've learned a lot. The script is about 15 or 20 pages long, and there are around a dozen different stories. Now, like Ted said, whether or not you believe in ghosts or spirits or phenomena or ESP or whatever, the stories are pretty interesting. They range from the, shall we say, hard to believe to the ones that makes you wonder. For instance, there's a story that we tell on my tour that involves people who were doing a commercial photography shoot in one of the second-story buildings along South Palafox there. They had interior decorators or something like that, and they had the cameras set up, and they were shooting photographs and trying to get these interiors right. They had the doors open so they could photograph out toward Ferdinand Plaza there, and Jackson Square, with Jackson at the other end there, and all that. Excuse me. And they took the film back in the days before we had digital cameras, developed the film, and lo and behold, on each shot was sort of a blurry outline of a man. No explanation as to who the guy was or how he got there, but showed up on each of the shots there, which they found quite intriguing, in different positions, clearly observing the proceedings and so on. That seems to be the strongest photographic evidence of something that might have happened like that. There are other stories similar to that. One of mine is about the headless lady who wanders up and down Romana Street there, and she was supposedly has been seen in a variety of different poses in a long dress back from the 1800s or late 1700s, thereabouts. According to the story, she and her father were out taking a stroll early one morning when they were approached by a band of pirates. Now, pirates were actually fairly common in our area back in the 16, 17, 1800s, when the Spanish and the British were here. They were the equivalent of desperados looking for targets of opportunity, and one of their favorite targets of opportunity was kidnapping for ransom, where they grabbed wealthy local people and held them for ransom, and that's basically what happened according to the legend in this particular story. They grabbed the woman intending to hold her for ransom. Her father intervened and was promptly killed on the spot. She had a large ring on one finger and attacked the pirate captain who had killed her father with his sword. And as she smashed him in the face with her ring, it removed one of his eyeballs. And in a rage, he removed her head, which probably wasn't a fair trade when you think about it, even with her shoulders. Now, they ran, left the two bloody bodies there on the ground. So the story goes that late at night, this particular ghost could be seen in a long, flowing white dress, and they could identify her as that particular woman because they said that they could see the flash of the large diamond on her little ghostly hand. And she was described as a rather tall woman, which strikes me as logical because you got to remember, if she didn't have a head, she must have been a big woman indeed if they thought she was tall. But on the other hand, how do we know whether this was that particular woman or some other beheaded woman? Because, one headless woman, I would assume, looks pretty much like another one. But anyway, those are some of the stories that we have.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't there somebody that lived in one of the houses that I recall on one of the ghost tours some years ago, a man that had bought one of the houses down on Government Street, not knowing the stories, confided in a friend that he had been terrified the night before recently by what appeared to be a ghost, and when pressed for explanation, he described exactly what you're describing, and supposedly, according to credible witnesses that knew him, that he did not know the story beforehand, and genuinely was
Right.
terrified, and then recounted the story with a description of exactly the headless woman in the flowing white, which walked
shiny
through,
diamond.
walked through his bedroom wall
Right.
while he was in bed.
Yeah.
He woke up and she walked through the bedroom and exiting the other wall.
I see. That would tend to get one's attention.
I think
assume. Yes.
the story was he was very, very attentive at that point.
Well, I have a friend who is now retired from the Pensacola Police Department, and early one weekday morning around 2 o'clock, he was parked, actually they built it all up now, but he was parked over in the general vicinity of the Judicial Center, which was not built up in those days, writing a report, and had his inside dome light on, and it was very quiet. It was warm weather. He had the windows open on his cruiser car. This would have been back in the late 60s. I didn't become a deputy until 1970, so it was before I actually became a cop. And he was sitting there writing a report, and he heard female laughter, which was not obviously unheard of, but he was in a fairly quiet section, and he looked, and about a block away, coming down Main Street, were three women dressed in what he described as period costumes. They were long, flowing dresses. One of them had a big hat on or something like that. And he was struck by this was not Halloween. He figured they must have been to a party, and they were linked arm in arm, laughing and giggling. And he was so amazed at the sight that he reached up, turned off his dome light. He had his visor down to reflect the light onto his report, put the visor up, cranked the car up, intending to drive over and ask them who they were. And when he looked out the window, they were gone. Now, he swears that this was a true story. I have no other explanation for it other than what he said, but I always found that quite interesting. As far as stories go of unusual activities there, I think my favorite has to do with the Pensacola Historical, well, not with the Historical Museum, but with the Wentworth Museum, the Old City Hall. And the first time I did this tour, of course they rehearsed us pretty good, and we had to practice a lot and so on. And I had a pretty good-sized group, around 15 or 20 people on my first go-round, and we went out there and stood on the corner, and I was telling the story. This happened not many years ago. A lady was one of the volunteers from the Historical Society, was working inside the Wentworth Museum. And all of a sudden, a crow, large crow, blackbird, fluttered up against the glass door, quite agitated, fluttering, flapping, and pecking on the window, and then flew off. It certainly attracted her attention. There weren't that many people in the museum, and most of the ones that were either in the back or upstairs. And she looked. A few minutes later, back came the crow against the window. Did it 3 times, and she was so struck by the unusual behavior, she stepped back, went outside, and the bird had flown away. She called across the street to the Historical Museum from the Wentworth Museum to talk with one of the volunteers over there and describe this particular situation and how unusual it was. And the lady that she talked to said, well, I'm sorry, I don't have time to really talk about it right now. We just received word that Mr. Wentworth had died. T.T. Wentworth, the man for whom the museum was named, had passed away just a short time before that. And the thing that was interesting about this is that you probably are familiar with the old Southern tradition that if a bird gets in your house, this is a foreshadowing of the death of a loved one. And I finished the story following my script. I don't have any personal knowledge of it. And as we moved to the next location, we had a couple of costumed people with us. One of the ladies stepped up and touched me on the shoulder. She said, that was a good job. I said, well, thank you. She said, I was the volunteer that was working that day in the museum. Said, you told it exactly as that script was. So that was kind of interesting. Have you had experiences like this? Anything along those lines?
No, unfortunately.
Right.
No, nothing. No UFO sightings, no ghost sightings. Actually, it'd be interesting if I did see a UFO sighting, but I was only 5 years old, so I'm not really sure exactly what I did see.
Good point.
So I can't really describe it. But
well, the walking tour is fun. It's not strenuous. We're not a city of hills or anything like that, but it's
wear comfortable walking shoes.
Yeah, but you do need to wear good, comfortable shoes, and it takes about an hour or so. The tour that I do, the bar and brothel tour, like I said, starts at the Historical Museum, which itself used to be the old Gulfside Bar back in the late 1800s. And we move on down to go to the Wentworth Museum. Then we talk about where the art museum is now, the Pensacola Art Place Gallery.
Yeah, the Museum of Art.
Museum of Art, that's it. Okay. Well, the Museum of Art, of course, is the old Pensacola Police Department from many years ago. Next to it is Quayside Gallery, which was one of the old firehouses. You can clearly see the outline of the door of the firehouse when you're facing it. That's aligned east and west, and when you're standing over by the Cultural Center and looking, you can clearly see the outline of the doors from the firehouse, which is where the horses were kept on the ground floor. The firefighters slept up on the second floor. That was the Germania Hose Company, Germania, the Germania Hose Company, which was first established shortly after the Civil War. And back in those days, it was semi-volunteer, semi-private firefighters. We didn't have municipal firefighters like we do in this day and time, but they were still quite the heroes. They were big macho guys, of course, that worked at putting out fires, and they slid down their fire poles and hitched up their horses and had kept the fire going in the boiler all the time. And one night they were asleep in their beds up there on the second floor above what is now the Quayside Art Gallery, and they heard some rapping and rattling at an outside door, evidently at the top of the stairs on the second floor. Somebody got up, went and looked, nobody there. Back to bed. This continued for the next hour or so, banging and rattling and noise and so on. And finally it got quiet, and a little while later, all the firefighters described that were present in the room a ghostly form that floated into the room apparition-like and went from bed to bed, floating on the air, clearly the shape of a man, they didn't know who, and reached out his little ghostly fingers and actually put his hands around their throats as they were cowering under the bedclothes, right through the clothes in best ghostly fashion, and eventually disappeared. And these manly firefighters were so terrified, nobody moved, they stayed in bed the rest of the night. But there was actually a newspaper story written about that incident, which we'll take at face value. They described this apparition appearing and terrifying them and putting his little bony, ghostly fingers around each of their throats as it floated around from room to room.
And we're sure that they hadn't just come back from one of the brothels or bars.
Well,
we're just not sure about that.
Well, one does have to give some thought to active imaginations and so on. And of course, I was thinking to myself, I wonder, kind of far-fetched, but would they have maybe pulled the leg of a gullible reporter just for effect? But I just tell them as it comes down the line. There's
certainly a lot of stories that do float around the historical district. So with the quantity of stories,
right.
I guess the odds are that maybe at least one of them is true out of all those stories. I know I've heard that they hanged more than one individual
right.
down in one of the old jails. I don't know if it's
sure.
one of the cultural center or what.
Right.
And I think there's been some ghostly comings and goings. In fact, I think it was either the Little Theater or one
yes.
one group. Are you aware of that story?
Right. Right. The last person hanged there happened in 1927. They were still doing hangings in Escambia County inside what is now the Cultural Center, which was formerly the Sheriff's Department, which was, after that, was the Court of Record building. When I was an Eager Beaver young deputy, I used to take prisoners down there, transport them down there back in the 70s and for court trials and hearings and so on before the new Judicial Center was built. But back in, I think around 1927 was the last hanging of anybody here in town, and he had been convicted. This particular guy had been convicted of a minor theft or something like that, but he'd been turned in by his brother, and he was so enraged at that even though he was working as a trustee around the jail, allowed to work outside on what a trustee is. They're on a considered low security risk, and they do just common labor. He had 30 days in jail. He left, walked down to the docks where his brother was a stevedore with an axe, split his brother's head open, tied the axe to his body, and tossed him into the drink down at the Commandencia Wharf there. Of course, the body floated up within a couple of days, and nobody else had a motive for it, and he was eventually convicted and then executed in that old jail there, and that was in 1927. I've forgotten the exact date. I think it was in July of 1927. And you've probably seen the famous photograph of them all gathered around the scaffold before the actual hanging. They had a preacher and the sheriff, and the doomed guy was holding the Bible and was hanged shortly thereafter.
Mm.
But as far as ghostly stories go, this next one isn't exactly ghostly, but I always liked it because we had the brothel part of the story was what they called Liberty Street, which was Zaragoza, and the brothels were lined up along Zaragoza Street, and we, like many communities, followed the idea that it was better to keep your sin in one place. So they had all the brothels in one place, and the law enforcement agencies sort of winked at the idea that illegal gatherings and activities were going on. Well, as you might expect, the young ladies who worked in that vicinity and worked in that business had a lot of free time on their hands during the daytime. And one of the things that they did was a lot of them did individual little small craft type jobs to earn money. A lot of them sewed in the afternoons or in the mornings and so on. Another thing that they did was they had a fishing lure company here in town, and the enterprising owner of this went to the women, who were very good with their hands, many of them seamstresses and so on, and gave them templates and pieces of pine and had them carve lure bodies to which they were painted, then attached hooks, back in I guess, around the turn of the centuries or so. And those particular lures are still in existence. The Heddon, H-E-D-D-O-N, a name I know you're familiar with, bought out the original company, and they have a whole line of lures to this day. If you can buy them in most of the stores, called the Zara Spook and the Zara Ghost and the Zara this and that. Zara for Zaragoza. And that's how they developed them. And I went to one of the fishing companies and bought one of the Zara Spooks in red and white, and I passed that around as one of my props to show people what they look like. So the enterprising young ladies picked up a few extra dollars doing extra work on the side like that, too.
Well, Don, I think we're getting close to the end of another very successful show. And at least I think it was successful.
Well, good.
I think this has been very entertaining. Of course, everybody will already be in the mood for Halloween, but maybe this will be a good nightcap for them. Give them a few stories maybe they haven't heard before. And, of course, since you'd only do one of the tours, next year they got other tours to choose from. If they choose, maybe if your costume just scares them too much, or if they just don't want to hear some of the same stories, there's other volunteers. And so we do look forward to the upcoming your upcoming tours, and those that did go with you, I'm sure will have a great time. For those of you that have watched this afternoon, thank you very much. We'll be back in a month with another show, and we'll be there. We'll be here. You be here, and we thank you all for viewing, and have a great Halloween.